under a white sky that swallowed sound and mercy alike. A woman named Clara McGraw trudged through the snow with a lantern in one hand, and her two small children clutching her skirts, the glow casting trembling halos over the frozen ground where a dark shape lay sprawled. A man, half buried in crimson-stained snow, breathing in shallow bursts that misted the cold air like a fading prayer, his chest marked with feathers, leather, and blood, and though every frontier instinct in her screamed to leave him, a Comanche raider enemy, danger. Something older than fear moved her feet closer until her lantern light brushed his face, and she saw not a warrior but a dying man, no older than her late husband who'd fallen at Fort Parker 2 winters before, leaving her with a cabin, 2 mouths to feed, and a silence so deep it rang. "Mama, is he dead?" whispered her son Samuel, his breath a trembling ghost in the cold. "Not yet," she said, her voice steady though her hands were shaking, "and that means he's still God's." So she knelt beside the bleeding stranger, feeling the heat of his wound through her gloves, and when she pressed her palm against it, the blood was shockingly human, shockingly warm. And in that moment, she stopped thinking of raids and revenge and started thinking of how quickly life runs out when no one helps. She called for Samuel to bring her shawl, for little Ruth to fetch the sled, and together they dragged the man back toward the cabin, through a world that seemed to hold its breath. Inside, she pushed aside the sewing table, laid him on a blanket by the fire, and worked through the night like she had with her husband. The same rhythm: heat the iron blade, boil the water, stitch, pray, breathe, cry quietly where the children wouldn't see. His pulse was thin as thread, his skin burned with fever, and he spoke words she didn't understand, soft and broken, something like, "Nina, son, home." She cleaned his wound, wrapped his side, and stayed awake until the fire gave up its last sparks, watching snow fall against the window like ashes. In the gray dawn, when she finally dozed, she woke to find her son sitting cross-legged near the stranger, poking the fire. He opened his eyes, Samuel said. The Comanche's gaze flicked toward her, not in gratitude but confusion, animal wariness like a wolf cornered but too weak to bite. Clara said nothing, only brought him broth and let him drink. Days passed. His strength returned slowly, every movement tight with pain and suspicion. The children whispered that maybe he was cursed. Maybe his tribe would come, but each day Clara saw less of the raider and more of a man trying to understand why he'd been saved. He tried to stand one evening, collapsing in pain, and she caught him by the arm. For a heartbeat they stood close, her fingers brushing his skin, and something unspoken passed. Fear, recognition, maybe forgiveness, neither of them knew how to name. Snow kept falling. Winter deepened. She learned his name from the word he murmured when she brought him water. Tohan. "You're safe here." "Tohan," she said once, and he stared at her with the strange stillness of someone who doesn't trust safety. But slowly, through gestures, through shared silence, through Samuel offering him a carved toy horse and Ruth braiding feathers into her doll's hair, a fragile peace formed between them, like fire coaxed from wet wood. One night a sound shattered that peace, the faint thunder of hooves far off in the trees. Tohan's eyes widened. "Raiders," he rasped. "Not mine. White men." Clara froze. The rifle on the wall seemed suddenly too far away. The men came before dawn, 3 bounty riders, faces wrapped in scarves, rifles ready. "We're looking for a wounded savage," one barked, eyes scanning the cabin. "Tracks lead right here." Clara stepped in front of the firelight, heart pounding. "Ain't no one here but me and my children," she said. "And my dead husband's memory, if that counts." The man sneered, pushing past her. Samuel gripped her skirt. Then a shadow moved. Tohan, rising behind the woodpile, rifle raised. The first shot split the morning, sending the bounty man spinning into the snow. The others fired wildly. Ruth screamed. Clara dove for her children as the second bullet shattered the window. glass spraying like ice shards. Tohan dropped one man with a blade thrown clean through the chest, then collapsed from blood loss, clutching his side. When the silence came, it was terrible, heavy, cold, final. Clara crawled to him, pressing her hands over the old wound reopened by battle. "Stay," she begged. "You saved us." But he only looked at her with a faint, fading smile. "No," he whispered. "You saved me." The words barely formed before his head fell back. She thought he was gone. For 3 hours she worked, binding, sewing, whispering prayers until her voice cracked, and by sunset the shallow breath returned. When spring came, so did color. The cabin no longer gray but streaked with light, the snow receding to reveal grass. Tohan stayed, half guest, half ghost, helping repair the fence, teaching Samuel to track deer, carving toys from cedar for Ruth. He spoke more each week, words broken but growing clearer. "You are strong," he told Clara one evening as they worked the garden, "like river rock." She smiled at that, the first true smile since her husband's death. But peace in the frontier never lasts. One morning a group of Comanche riders appeared at the edge of the meadow, silent as smoke. Clara's blood froze. Tohan stepped forward, hand raised. Their leader dismounted, scarred face unreadable. They spoke in a low, harsh rhythm that made the children cling to their mother's dress. Then slowly the leader nodded. He looked at Clara and touched his chest in a sign of respect before turning away. As they rode off, Tohan turned to her. "They know," he said, "that you saved me, that I belong here now." Weeks later, when fever swept the valley, it was Tohan who rode out to gather herbs from the hills, staying gone for days. When he returned, exhausted and bruised, he carried enough medicine to save every child in the valley, even those of the men who'd once hunted him. Rumors spread of the widow and her savage, whispered half in awe, half in judgment, but Clara no longer cared. She'd found something worth keeping alive. One dusk, as thunder rolled over the prairie and the first drops of rain struck the cabin roof, she looked out and saw him standing by the river, the wind in his hair, watching the water like it might speak his past back to him. She joined him. "Do you ever wish you'd died that night?" she asked quietly. He turned, eyes deep as storm clouds. "No," he said, "because then I'd never have learned what mercy looks like." Years passed. The cabin grew older, the children taller, and though Tohan sometimes vanished for days to hunt or visit his people, he always returned before the fire went out. On the anniversary of her husband's death, Clara found Tohan carving something in the snow, a small wooden figure of a man kneeling with his hand over his heart. "What's that?" she asked. He handed it to her. "A promise," he said. And maybe it was, because that spring when riders came again, this time soldiers accusing her of harboring enemies, it was Tohan who faced them, standing between her family and the rifles, speaking in both tongues, offering peace that cost him pride but saved their lives. In the end, it was not the snow nor the wars, nor the whispers that defined them, but the simple truth that two broken souls, one white, one Comanche, had shared fire and forgiveness when the world offered them none. And when the years turned gray and her children had families of their own, people in the valley still spoke of that winter night when the widow's lantern found the dying raider in the snow, and how the light she carried burned long after the cold was gone, a flame no storm could ever drown.